Welcome to Not So Silent. We'll say what you can't. We think we're right. I wouldn't bet on it. Unfortunately, we don't have much to talk about today. Not much has happened since our last recording on Wednesday. Except for, if you consider the election or whatever you want to call that, all going down. So we're going to be spending a lot of time talking, obviously, about what the media has described as our new president-elect, how the lawsuits are playing out. But we're going to go into it in a little bit different direction, considering many of you have actually probably already heard a lot of the news. We won't report just the news. We're going to give you some of the opinions on what's going to happen there. So I'm going to bring in my esteemed hosts with me, Chris Hertigan out of St. Louis, Sean Phelps in Kansas City. I'm Taylor Duncan coming to you from Nashville. How you guys doing?
Well, you should see the rioting going on in my area from conservatives. It's nuts. You've got people going to work and doing their jobs. You've got kids playing outside together. My gosh, my wife went to Walmart yesterday, got groceries. The rioting I'm seeing from the right is insane, and it's got to stop.
So pretty clearly, they've all said, we're done with this. We're sick of it. We're going to work.
It's anarchy. It's like they're going about their regular lives, and I can tell they're this close to burning everything down. It's unreal.
Well, it's a good thing when your wife went to Walmart, she couldn't get any guns.
This is true. They've hidden all of those. So, all right. So I think it's pretty clear. We've seen what happened last Wednesday when we talked. Things were a complete mess. We didn't know any bit of the outcome election. We now at least know what the media is describing as the outcome of the election, which is that Joe Biden will be our next president, the 46th president. However, there are significant amounts of claims of voter fraud. Some of the interesting reasons. So we'll talk a little bit about this. What do you guys see? So, Sean, you like to play the devil's advocate because, well, it's just easier doing that than picking sides. Chris and I tend to pick sides more often.
Comes with having a unit, as a man. But
yeah. But I do want to hear a little bit of the devil's advocate. So, Sean, I want you to react to some of this. So as you've seen, I think it's pretty clear. A lot of people are describing voter fraud, right? Or whatever you want to call it, election fraud. You see that as just anger towards how the election played out, correct?
Some of it. Clearly you're looking for examples of that, and there's a little bit of a confirmation bias of I want this to be a different result. So what can I find that supports my narrative? And then you see something like a meme about Wisconsin voter registration, and you're like, oh, look, I knew I was right. So I think some of that is confirmation bias. People are looking for those things, but I think I would just caution people to be really careful on the conspiracy theories that you buy into and stand on, because when they are debunked, if they are debunked, it loses some credibility. It's just the boy who cried wolf. So I do think there are legit concerns, and people need to make sure and do their research and find legitimate concerns, and be careful not to not to hop on every single conspiracy's bandwagon, because some of them are not correct. So you got to be careful.
All right, so here's my stance on it, right? Because I agree. I want to move forward. I want our country to be able to have free and fair elections, which is one of the things that makes us such a great country. The problem is, and Clay Travis talked a lot about this, it's the appearance that maybe has more. It's whether or not there was fraud is hard to know. I don't think any one of us three, and I don't think, frankly, most of the people in the media even truly know, is there or is there not fraud? I think everyone's going to have their guesses. But Clay Travis talks a lot about, in legal terms, is there the appearance of,
impropriety.
Impropriety or illegal act. And here's the hard part for me that I equate it to the lottery, right? From where I'm standing, and I think the three of us like to think of ourselves as regular guys who talk about politics, who talk about sports, who talk about the university system and so on. We're just regular guys talking about it from regular guys' perspective. So here's my regular guy perspective on this. It's like the lottery. And Sean, you and I had a discussion where I said, what about this? What about this? What about this? And in each one of the cases, you said, well, it's not that crazy. There's a 10% chance of that thing happening or a 20% chance of that thing happening. You're right. In each individual case, there is a chance any one of these things could have happened. But the whole concept, if you think about the lottery, the reason why the lottery is so hard to win, it's not impossible to pick a number between 1 in 10 or 1 in 40. What makes the lottery and the odds statistically so difficult is doing that 4 times or 6 times or however many balls they have in the lottery that you're picking. So when I start to look at this and I go, when you look at the number of balls that had to come out 10% or 5% chance it would happen, the overwhelming majority, you had to somehow strike your 1 out of 10 chances. I counted 11 different times, whether it be states or Senate races, 11 different times that things shifted after the election, and many times 2 and 3 days after the election. You had to hit your lottery ball 11 different times, whether it be the lottery ball. And again, I'm not talking, you might go, well, what about Florida? No, I'm talking the ones that all happened afterward. Everything happened after the election was done, when all these random new votes were found and everything else. Now, I'm not saying they just picked up a box, but when you start to look at it, it looks like they struck a lottery on 11 different balls. I'm talking Pennsylvania, Nevada, Georgia, Arizona, the Senate race in Michigan, the presidential race in Michigan, Wisconsin, and the list goes on. Everything's shifted after midnight or 1 a.m. on election day. That just strikes me as there's got to be a better explanation than just, it's just how it works. And they all happen to point to the same direction. And Dan Bogina, I'm going to go one step further. He talks about why he thinks there's some issues going on. And he said, look at the bellwether states, which he claims are Ohio and Florida. And he said, look at the bellwether counties. In fact, there are 2 counties dating back to 1930 that have picked the presidential election in every single year. They have gotten it right. Both of them got it wrong. And of the 18 counties that have the most connection as a probability of picking the election, there's only 2 that have gotten it every time. But then there's 16 others that are very, very highly likely and they correlate well with the actual election outcome. I think it was 14 of those 18 got it wrong. You just start to look at all of the data screams to, this doesn't make a lot of sense. Something happened here that doesn't seem right. And I don't know what it is. And I'm not trying to say I'm certain there is voter fraud. And my bigger issue is I think it's going to be very difficult to find enough voter fraud to overturn this. I think you're going to find 1,000 dead people who voted. I don't know that you're going to find 21,000 in Wisconsin. I think you're going to find things that happened that were irregularities in Pennsylvania. Will you, without a reasonable doubt, be able to overturn Pennsylvania based on just voter fraud? I don't think so. What say you guys?
Well, yeah, there are other factors too in your lottery example. One is if you said before the election, Trump's going to get 20% of the black male vote, you would say hands down he's going to win. If you said he's going to get 48% of the Hispanic vote in many key states, you'd be like, there's no way he loses. Many prognosticated that if he was within 3% of the the popular vote, there's no way he loses. All of those things came true, and he still lost. Then there's the idea that Biden somehow motivated people to get out more so than Obama did. And I don't know if the hatred for Trump is more powerful than the love of Obama. I don't know. But I kind of treat this like we would treat cases of police brutality. We'd go, hold on, let's wait to see what the evidence shows, right? And if the evidence shows it was racially motivated, then we're going to prosecute and we're going to take care of that, right? And if it shows it wasn't, you need to let that go. I'm kind of taking the same posture, which is it has the appearance of impropriety. We should do a full investigation. And we should see it play out. And what's striking me as odd is the Democrats are very much against the this playing out judicially. I would think that the worst thing that can happen to Biden is he tries to block this kind of stuff, and half the country believes that this was a bunch of BS. If anything, they should want all of these investigations to happen, turn up Buckus, and then for conservatives to be upset but go, yeah, we can't argue with the facts. That is what it is, right? So I think for the good of the country, this has to play out, which certainly leads to another question, which is, if it plays out and Trump is the victor, is that really for the good of the country or not?
Well, that's going to be our next discussion. Sean, what say you, Mr. Devil's Advocate, on the lottery theory of, yeah, some of these, in each individual case, you can probably make a claim. But when you start to dig through and realize how many things, how many, 1%, 5% probabilities happened, and they all went in the same direction, it really screams something doesn't make sense. What say you on that?
Well, on the 2-county thing, I think you can debunk that pretty easily. And that's sort of like in the finance world where people pick stocks. And so when there's the first ever presidential election, and then there's however many number of counties, let's assume that half of the counties voted one way and half the counties voted the other way, then half the counties are right. And if they all do similar normal voting patterns, then the next election, 25% of them are right. And then you get to the point where you're 10 elections in and there's going to be a county that's got it right every time, just by chance, not based on any reliable.
But you're missing. You're not arguing but you're not arguing the lottery theory, which is, you're right. Each of them have a 1 to 10% probability of happening. But when you have to have 25 different things all work out, and they all had to land in their 10%, it becomes statistically.
I kind of turn that against you a little bit. I don't like the argument people make against the Electoral College. You hear a lot of people on the left say the Electoral College is stupid because these small states have an outsized opinion, and California doesn't get enough votes, and it's not fair. And one of their arguments is like, well, why should the entire election just be decided by Ohio? Well, Ohio might be the last state to finalize their numbers that year and submit their Electoral College votes, and it tips them over the edge. But they're not the ones that made the decision, right? If California does vote the other way, then a different decision is made. Every single state that they got electoral votes from mattered, right? So Florida is a big deal for the Republicans. That could have gone the other way, and it didn't. So I think you can find just as many cases to confirm that it was a great election for
the only difference is they finished their count the night of the election.
Yeah,
and both parties prognosticated something different. The Republicans, were saying there's going to be fraud. Democrats were saying, "Ooh, there's going to be a red mirage that night." It gives the appearance that all election I did was tell Democrats how many votes they had to come up with to win the next few days. And so if one was right about their prediction, why can't the other be right? Florida was in because it was in. That was it. No time to screw with it.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. I don't get why the entire country at this point, again, I'm on the losing side of this one, so I can understand being on the other side. But it certainly felt like, and I gave you guys this example, it was like watching the Super Bowl with the Patriots and the Falcons. Falcons are up 28 points at halftime, and all of a sudden the broadcast goes dark, and and they kick every fan out of the stadium, and the broadcast goes dark, and all of a sudden they turn it on with 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and it's a 3-point game, and you're like, what happened? And they're like, yeah, it happened. And all the Falcons players are yelling that there were calls that were missed and everything. And they're like, no, this is all right. And we're like, well, can we at least see the recording? And they're like, no, it didn't take, the cameras didn't work. It's like, there was no camera working, none. No, not that we know of. Wait, can we at least try to replay? Like, something's got to give. This can't be true. Nope, it just is what it is. I know it's crazy at 28 point over, it can happen. We've seen it happen. So, it's just that sorry. And you're
I think that the challenge is the narrative of the timing of it and the way it unfolded, right? If you were in a coma for the last week and you just saw the 99% reporting stats now of here's the votes that came in the counties that they came from in the states and the way it played out, you would believe it. You would go, yeah, I guess that makes sense. I buy it. But it's the night of things being red and then becoming blue day after day after day, and the Arizona early call and those things that make you go, I don't like the way it went down.
And again, you're right, except for a lot of what Chris said and a lot of what a lot of people are saying, which is there are a significant amount of statistical analysis that have said this never should have happened, except somehow crazy voter turnout in just specific states, and they all happen to be, swing states and so on. And it just, again, it's the lottery theory is all I'm saying. I'm not saying I know for a fact there is voter fraud. There wasn't when I went in and voted. I didn't get some sense that there was fraud going on. I wasn't a poll watcher, but when you're hearing just tens, dozens, hundreds of poll watchers being told they couldn't go in, only Republicans, it just
there's a person being arrested on felony counts for signing up people with dementia, like in a retirement home, like people that couldn't even sign their own ballot. And now that's only like 46 votes, right? Then there's the Michigan issue with the voting machine error that was caught by people on Twitter kind of raising a stink about it. Oh yeah, this is a 3,000 vote difference, which I think is a 6,000 vote swing. Oh yeah, by the way, that software was used in a bunch of other counties, a bunch of other states. Could be a one-off, but enough of these things are popping up where you're going, this is strange. And again, maybe we're not as lasered in on it because, like, I don't know, I think back to 2016 and go, what was different about that? They were surprised that Trump won, but they didn't have 3 days to make up the vote count. This whole mail-in absentee vote thing is just it has been the narrative of like, this can be fraught with error and fraud. And that was the fear. And that's what it appears to have happened. Now, I'm fine accepting the election results if we can verify that, there wasn't enough impropriety to make a difference. I'm fine with that, but I at least want to know. I want to know.
I'm with Chris. I have no problem. Look, if Biden's our new president, he's our new president, and I'm going to deal with that. And he's our president. And my hope is we keep the Senate and there's some gridlock and we're good to go. That would be fine with me. It just feels, like I said, like I'm with Chris, that I'm going, it just feels like, boy, they hit the lottery. And this was a lottery with the statistical analysis of like 8 billion to 1, but somehow they got it. And they're not willing to let us watch the balls drop. And we can't like double check that there was no magnets in the balls. And that's it. That's all we want to do, because it certainly feels like there was something fishy going on. And, the old saying, where there's smoke, there's fire. So at least let us check to see if there's fire. And if there's not, let's move forward. But the mainstream media and the Hollywood elites and everyone else telling us just deal with it and Trump sucks and everything else, I think is obnoxious. I think it is absolutely obnoxious. And again, America is sick and tired of this. We are sick and tired of the media telling us this stuff, the censorship, and we're going to get to that in just a second. We'll talk about censorship in a second. I do want to talk. I think Chris brought up a great point. What happens if? So, Sean, we're gonna play a little prognostication game early. So we'll call it our prognostication station this time. So our prognostication. What happens if? Well, first let's prognosticate, Sean. What do you think is going to happen? When we get to January, who's our president?
I think it's going to be Joe Biden.
What'd you say?
I think it will be Joe Biden.
Okay, so we'll start with Joe Biden because that's your prognostication. Joe Biden is our president in January. What happens to our country?
I think we're going to be okay for a little while. I'm a little bit nervous about COVID shutdowns, and then you hear the news today of the vaccine. Interesting timing, Pfizer.
We'll get to that as well.
But that's probably my biggest concern, is he's talked about shutting down the country immediately to get a handle on COVID, and so that could have some economic impact.
He claimed his first order of business was to create a mask mandate on a national level, which I thought was a horrendous decision on his part, because that is one of the most controversial topics.
Let states do what they want, man. Stay out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that. I've heard re-enter the Paris Agreement day one. I mean, there's a lot of day one stuff that's supposed to be happening. So.
And you know what? The Paris Accord, I get it. That was probably less controversial. But to go after the mask mandate, I thought was the dumbest thing he could have said. Because frankly, if there's anything I don't want to weigh in on until Trump's out of office and let Trump be the one who deals with it, was COVID. So the only reason in my belief that he would ever bring up COVID this early was because he knew that the vaccine was coming out. But that's all I'm saying.
You know how many people I know voted for Biden and are complaining about the shutdown right now? I'm like, do you even realize what you just voted for? Like,
They will stop. They will stop complaining after they realize that the news today that there's a COVID vaccine that has a 90% efficacy on it.
How are they going to avoid giving Trump credit for that? They're going to try.
They're absolutely. Cuomo came out today. And said, "Do not allow the vaccine to go out under Trump. Wait until it's the Biden administration to push it out." I mean, it's remarkable.
It's unbelievable. Right? I don't think people are that stupid. I don't think they are.
I don't think they are either. And I think now that vaccine got announced, I would guess there is 5% of the Biden voters going, "Oh, whoops. So, but never mind. So let's get back to, so Sean says Biden.
I think that the government moves at a pretty glacial pace. So I think nothing will change very quickly.
I think you're missing. I think you're missing the question here, Sean. I'm not saying like what kind of policy is going to be enacted. I'm saying what is the culture in America going to be like when half the people in America think that their voice was screwed with, and there's a lot of people going, "I'm not buying this. Something weird happened here," and then all of a sudden, Biden's president. So you think, we're just going to go about business as usual, and there's going to be some frustrated people, and we're just going to move on.
I do. I think there'll be a lot of attention on Georgia for obvious reasons, and then people will live their life.
Okay, so for the Senate races, you're saying in January. All right. So let me ask you the question again, and then I'm going to ask Chris. So, Sean, now let's flip it. Let's say your prognostication is wrong because you're typically wrong about everything. Trump is our president in January. What happens?
Pandemonium.
Elaborate.
I mean, like California tries to secede from the union. Oregon declares the whole state a autonomous zone. And then there's a couple counties in Oregon that are like, can we be in Idaho now? And yeah, I mean, just absolute chaos. Okay.
So Chris, same to you. Biden is elected president, and January 20th or whatever, he's inaugurated. He's our 46th president. I guess we're not going to get into the details of exactly the legal cases, but somehow there's not enough voter fraud or the media pushes back or whatever.
So it sort of depends on whether or not these lawsuits reveal that he's the genuine winner. I'm going to go to the assumption that they do. I think, and then the next part depends on who wins the Senate races to some degree. But I actually don't think the rioting is going to stop. Remember, the rioting started under Obama. It wasn't under Trump that it started. So, and also Antifa, to my knowledge, doesn't like Biden either. They just want revenge. They just want to tear the system down. So I actually don't think riots are going to stop. I think the media will stop, showing them. They won't, or they'll continue to do what they do, which is call them mostly peaceful. But the Democrats have gotten in bed with some very bad people, and that's not a dial you can just dial back now that you're the president. So there's some people that they're in bed with that they permitted, and I don't think they're going to be able to turn that off. That being said, if Trump is elected, wow. I think red states that allow the National Guard to come in will be fine. There will be rioting, but I think it'll be, people will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and they'll go to prison, they'll go to jail, and it'll calm down. And then I think the blue states will destroy themselves.
Yeah, I think, and to give you my prognostication on it, I think if Biden gets in, I think you're going to see a national divide that even makes what we are at right now look, peaceful, soft. I think the divide will be so dramatic. I think you'll hear I just think there'll be frustration like you can't imagine. And I think
do you think that kind of depends on his policies though?
Well, what do we have that is a shared value between conservatives and Democrats right now? Can you name one, Sean?
Oof.
I can't. I'm trying.
That's where I think the problem is. I think in the past, we had some shared values about the country and what we wanted for it. We had different ideas on how to get there. And it's moved well beyond that to this vicious culture war of like people who want the government intruding into their lives and people who want to be left alone, which is not a new thing necessarily. But I think the culture gap is so wide that we have very little common ground. And where we do, the liberals become more conservative, like a Tim Pool, who's more of a liberal guy that's voting conservative, right? Like, I don't think there's any shared values. I think Taylor's right. It's going to be divided.
I think the divide it'll be difficult to walk to school. It's going to be a pain in the butt. Now, if Trump gets in, and I say these words with caution, please be careful. I'm not saying I want it. I think you'll see some form of civil war, whether that's a legal or cold civil war. I think you will see full on. It will be. I mean, if you think the divide, the worst part about this whole thing is I believe all of this is media driven. And I said it in our last one, my Christmas wish was that the mainstream media got destroyed. And because I think they have created this whole thing. They have created a divide that you can't, I mean, it is disgusting watching the Hollywood elites and Silicon Valley and the mainstream media have created such a disgusting divide in our country. And if Trump gets in, you will see like absolute craziness out of the mainstream media like you've never seen. And it is going to drive the two sides to almost a civil war. Like I said, I think it's not going to be people with bayonets in the street. I think you will see mass rioting in major urban centers, especially the far, far blue ones in California and up the West Coast, Chicago, New York, maybe Atlanta, Houston. And then I think, unfortunately, you're going to see lawsuits like you've never seen. It is going to become the nastiest, because I do think it'll be the Supreme Court that is going to be a major part of turning it to Trump. And then you're going to see the Amy Coney Barrett and the Gorsuch, and then it's going to be, I mean, all the rules will be thrown out the window. The Democrats will do any and everything they can. The Republicans will fight back, and it'll be the end of our sort of, you know.
Let me throw a different prognostication at you. I'll start with Sean. So, Sean, let's assume that the Republicans have the Senate 51-49. And there is impropriety, meaning Trump can be president legally. What's better for the country, Biden or Trump to be president?
Well, one of the compromises that I don't know if this is viable or if this was just a random blog article I read, but was a Biden-Pence option. Don't know if that's an option. It's been done historically in the history of our country. You got Jefferson Burr merging tickets.
That would be interesting. I might take that because, again, that's the deciding vote if it's 50-50. I mean,
I'll take it.
Morally, I feel like if there's impropriety and legally Trump should be president, I don't want to shift that ground. I feel like that's really dangerous. That being said, I feel like it may be more advantageous. Well, let's say Biden wins legitimately. That may not be such a bad thing for Republicans, honestly.
Again, if he wins legitimately, I get it. I get it.
If you have the check of the Senate, that's a powerful check.
Yeah.
So, all right. So I don't know that we're going to solve, but I think that's a good question for everyone to think about is, you know, who's going to get in? I want the fair election. Again, I want the proper results to be played out. I did find, for those who didn't hear, the COVID vaccine has been announced by Pfizer. I find the announcement shocking. Literally just unbelievable. 2 days after Biden is hard to believe that they didn't know about this on Friday, Thursday, Wednesday, and all of a sudden it gets announced today, and it is being said that it has 90% efficacy, which is that the flu vaccine has like a 60%. So this vaccine is like off the charts good, according to what I heard. Again, I'm not an epidemiologist. So COVID vaccine gets announced. If that had gotten announced last Monday, I think things are totally different. And I think we have our second term, president. I just find, again, the more and more this stuff is going on, Sean, the more and more I don't want to be Alex Jones. I'm not trying to be InfoWars here. I want to be, three dudes who just talk normal with each other, but it's really starting to feel like the Illuminati is at work here.
Yeah. Well, I played that game theory one through my head this morning and went, wait a minute. The timing is obviously incredibly suspicious. It's really interesting timing that it wasn't last Monday and that it's this Monday. But I feel like if you're Pfizer, you didn't really have a choice, because if you announce it pre-election, Trump wins, like it or not, you're on the Trump wagon now. And if anything goes wrong with the vaccine, if anything goes wrong with the Trump presidency, I mean, there's a lot. You put a big, big, big target on your back if you're Pfizer.
Aren't you? Hang on. At what point did we stop doing what was right and we started doing what was politically right?
I'm not saying they did anything wrong. I'm saying they potentially knew it was coming, and rather than saying, "Hey, we're pretty sure we're ready to announce
They
this
acted in
soon,"
self-interest is what Sean's saying.
they acted in their best self-interest. Yeah, they did
But
what was right for their
but
business.
that's wrong. That's just wrong. If they knew about it a week ago, that is wrong that they withheld that information knowing it would have
What would that information have
And
done?
to
The
be
vaccine's
fair,
not in your hands. You can't get the vaccine today. What
to
would
be
that have
fair,
done?
I don't put Trump signs on my lawn. That may have gotten another vote or two, but I'm acting out of self-interest and self-preservation. I don't want somebody throwing rocks through my window. I'm not saying it's right, and that's a sad state of affairs when we are afraid to even elect the president legally because we're afraid of how violent the other side is. And it's obnoxious that the other side doesn't see that for some reason. They don't get that.
All right, last topic I wanted to go over today. And on Wednesday we're going to talk sports because it was a fun sports weekend, a fun gambling weekend. Sean won $5,000.
So he's the new manager of Gambler's Corner. So if anything, we need to go to Sean for all of our information from now on. He is the lottery picker.
All right. So the last thing, and I want everyone, all of our listeners to know, come find us on Parler and Rumble at Not So Silent Pod, at Not So Silent Pod on Parler and Rumble. Have you heard what's going on in the big tech world? Where, interestingly enough, Twitter, Facebook, Chris got censored heavily on Facebook. We've been censored on Twitter. Nothing I even say is all that controversial. And Parler, which is the conservative version of Twitter, has blown up. It is now the number one app in the App Store and in the Google Play Store, ahead of TikTok and everything else. And Rumble is moving up the charts, which is basically the same thing for YouTube. And you're seeing the same thing come out of, there's conservative versions of YouTube, Facebook. And this is where, when I say there's going to be a divide in our country, that to me is one of the greatest examples of a divide in our country. You are going to be left with the liberal trash over on Twitter, the conservative trash over on Parler. We're going to be on both. And the people who are going to be on both are the ones who are just trying to gain followers, either haters on one side and lovers on the other. And that's where we've gotten to, is there is no platform of free speech anymore. One is censoring, and you're seeing a rise of Parler, Rumble, and so on. So again, come follow us. We will be launching our first podcast video today on Rumble. So that's going to launch on Rumble. You're going to see stuff on Parler. I actually got a comment back, Chris. You'll be proud. Clay Travis he parlered back to me, and he said, number one and only rule is DBAP. So
I love it.
So one of our inspiration, Clay Travis, is recognizing Not So Silent, and we will make sure to follow DBAP. And for those of you who know Clay Travis, we will stick around like helicopters instead of mosquitoes. So, all right, that's it for today. Thank you guys for listening. Follow us on Twitter at Not So Silent Pod, on Rumble at Not So Silent Pod. Come like us on YouTube, where you can watch us. Leave us comments. Tell us how much you hate us. That's even better. We'd love that. Tell us how much you love us. And that's it. Goodbye.